This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 441, CI for Drupal modules. This episode of Talking Drupal is sponsored by Hero Devs. On today's show, we are talking about CI for Drupal modules, how it helps us build Drupal, and the ongoing work and improvements being made with guest Fran Garcia-Linares. We'll also cover Require on Publish as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Fran Garcia-Linares. He is a full-stack web developer specializing in Drupal. He's also a problem solver, so he likes new challenges as well. He lives in the south of Spain, and he loves being outdoors with his family and enjoying the sun in nice weather. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Cool. Thank you. Welcome everybody as well, and thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm Nick Laffin, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are joining us again, Stephen Cross, founder at Talking Drupal. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, always love to pop in every once in a while. I like it when John has something else to do. So thanks, John.
And also joining us for the next 4 weeks, Anna Mikhailova, Director of Technology at Kalamuna. Kalamuna's Director of Technology. Anna has over 10 years of web development experience with an affinity for Drupal. As an Acquia Triple Certified Drupal expert, she is known for transforming impossible tasks into victories. Anna's thirst for knowledge keeps her at the forefront of her field, perpetually honing her development skills and expanding her technical repertoire. Thank you for joining us and looking forward to hosting with you the next 4 weeks.
Thank you so much for inviting. I'm excited to be here.
And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and maintainer of a number of Drupal modules of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to have content fields that could be optional until a piece of content is published or ready to be published? There's a module for that. It's called Require on Publish. It was created in April of 2018 by Mike Priscilla, though recent releases are by Mark Dorison of Chromatic. It has an 8.x-1.10 version available, which is actively maintained. In fact, that latest release was just over a month ago. It does have both security coverage and test coverage, and it has 18 open issues, 8 of which are bugs, which is quite good considering it is currently in use by just over 3,000 websites. Now, with this module enabled, the form to configure fields for your content types will have a new checkbox labeled Require on Publish. If you check this new box instead of the normal required field checkbox, you will have the field only required if the content is being published or already published. So this can be really useful for publishing workflows where you want content creators to be able to quickly get started on content, but ensure that fields will be filled in before publishing, which can be particularly useful for fields that will optimize the content for things like SEO, social sharing, search, and so on. So let's talk about Require on Publish.
This is one of the categories of modules that I love because I've just gotten so used to just having that discussion with the clients. Like either we require it and you have to add it when you add the page, or you don't require it and you risk not having it. This has been around for 6 years and I haven't looked for it, but I can see so many clients using this. Like it just makes it so nice to be able to just quickly build a couple of pieces of content or build a couple of pieces of fields on a piece of content and then, add stuff later, but make sure everything is there before you publish. It's so useful. I'm probably going to install this on almost every project. To be honest.
Martin, I had the same response. You started this description with, have you ever wanted to have a content field that could be optional to published? And no, I have never wanted to. But now that I know it's available, I do want it. And I could probably use it in dozens of places and on projects I'm working on now.
The clients were asking for this functionality, and I'm surprised I never actually found the module. I believe I searched Drupal.org a couple times, and that didn't pop up for me, but it's very exciting. I am actually planning to go and offer it to a couple of our clients. I think they will be very excited as well.
Mm-hmm. it's really cool. You don't need to like put a to do or any kind of placeholder text just to fill up the gaps. So really exciting.
Sometimes in Drupal builds use things like form modes as a way to sort of maybe have like a simple version of the form to create content initially, and then have more of like a complex one for sort of like further editing and refinement. But something that's really tied to the publishing workflow, I think, is both really powerful, but also like really simple for the end user. So I think it's definitely one that's nice to have in the ecosystem for sure.
Have you tested, Martin? Is it working with content moderation as well as just default publishing? That's what's interesting, I guess.
I haven't personally tested it with content moderation. I see there are a couple of issues in the issue queue related to content moderation, but they tend to be, at least from what I've seen, related to the use of additional modules as well. So like with paragraphs, or I forget, there was another one that was also related to another module. There is also a feature request that I added a +1 to around being able to actually tie the requirement to a particular publishing state. So as opposed to having it only be when it goes published, maybe you can say when it reaches a particular state in your workflow, that's when you want it to become required. So I feel like that would be a pretty cool enhancement. So, I'm not 100% sure in terms of moderation in general. It sounds to me like it probably works as long as you don't have too many other pieces that are part of your overall architecture.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And I will go and +1 that feature as well, because I can see more complicated workflows. That will be very useful.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. And if our listeners wanted to suggest a module of the week to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
They can always drop a module of the week suggestion in the Talking Drupal channel in Drupal Slack, or they can reach out to me directly as ManClue in all of the Drupal and social channels.
Great. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
This episode of Talking Drupal is sponsored by Hero Devs. Let's talk about life after Drupal 7 end of life. Since August 2023, there has been a lot of discussion around Drupal 7's official end of life in January 2025. It's no secret that many companies, organizations, and individuals are still on Drupal 7 and have yet to migrate. I think we can all agree that migration, while beneficial, is not always feasible. And this is where Hero Devs comes in. Hero Devs has partnered with core team maintainers of Drupal 7 to build and maintain their Drupal 7 never-ending support product, ensuring the same quality of support you have come to expect over the years. Drupal 7 Never-Ending Support, or NES, allows for an effortless transition, allowing your site to remain secure, compliant, and compatible after Drupal 7 goes end of life. This allows you to migrate on your own time, or potentially not at all. Hero Devs promises to keep Drupal 7 alive and well, even offering support for the current top 100 Drupal 7 modules. If you'd like to learn more about Drupal 7 Never-Ending Support, you can visit herodevs.com. That's HERODEVS.com. Okay, so moving on to our primary topic, Fran, let's start with an easy question. What does CI mean?
Cool, yeah. So let's get the basics right. So CI stands for continuous integration. And it's usually a system that most sites, or in this context, modules, use to ensure that new changes or bug fixes do not actually break anything unexpected. So every time you push something, it would run a series of tests and checks on the code, and it will let you know whether everything is correct to the best of the knowledge of the CI system or not.
So how do module contributors use CI?
Yeah, so in the context of Drupal, I mentioned before that tests could be written against a site, but as we know, Drupal is made of multiple modules, and those modules introduce some unique functionality. So module maintainers can write tests for those modules. Those tests could be something like PHP unit, but it could be also like JavaScript functional tests, or as well, they might want to follow certain coding standards just because they like coding in that way, or they want to check for spelling errors. So all these sort of things are the things that a module maintainer can include within their modules. So while they will not be testing the final site, at least they will be ensuring that the module functionality is as expected, as anticipated. Usually one of the workflows that many module maintainers do, especially as well core, is every time that a new bug is reported, it will not get fixed until a test has been added to it. So you might start from zero. You may not have any single test written in your module, but then as you add, as users create bugs and all that, then you start writing tests and you start getting more and more coverage for your module.
Nice. So when we talk about Drupal CI specifically, do we mean the website itself, or are we talking about CI that supports module developers and contributors? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, so I think over the next 20-30 minutes, I'm going to try to clarify a few specific terminology, because I understand it's confusing because I went through that process myself. So when we talk about Drupal CI, that is an old, very old, and soon to be deprecated system that allows testing of Drupal core and Drupal modules. Say that you are building a site for your client, you are not going to put it on Drupal CI, because Drupal CI was custom built for testing Drupal core and for testing Drupal modules. We need to think that sometimes Drupal is old, and that's that's good, but as well it means that we started to have some problems before solutions existed out there. So Drupal even predates Git, for example. So if we think about systems like Circle CI, Travis CI, even GitLab Pages, GitLab CI, those systems didn't exist like 10, 15 years ago. So as they were not available, the Drupal Association and the community wrote what is called Drupal CI, which is what I said is the tool that we are trying to deprecate, and that is used only for modules. I would have said core, but they stopped using in Drupal core. They stopped using Drupal CI a few months ago completely. Now it's only available for modules. I think we'll be talking about it in a little bit.
So when you say Drupal CI kind of predates a lot of stuff, I think that's one of the things that always amazes me about Drupal in the community is that it comes up with a problem, comes up with a solution. Sometimes those solutions become mainstream in the wider development world. Sometimes there's a solution that comes up that's that fits our needs better. Like that's one of the reasons why Drupal has been migrating to GitLab CI, right? Rather than hosting all that stuff internally, there's solutions for that. And same thing, moving to GitLab CI, Drupal CI took a lot of maintenance and a lot of effort. That effort can be put into making the tests better or faster or many other things. I'm curious, what tools does Drupal use for CI? Because if I go to one of the pipelines running, there's a lot of stuff in there. What kinds of things does Drupal use for?
Yeah. So the short answer is we are not doing any overrides to the GitLab runner system. So we could have enabled GitLab CI like way before, because that was literally just ticking a checkbox on the GitLab admin interfaces, allow modules to use CI. But we didn't want to leave module maintainers kind of in the open without any sort of help, because up until now they were used to Drupal CI, which I wouldn't say it was a black box, because obviously the code is open, everybody can go and see, but it was quite custom and complicated and just nearly impossible to run locally. And either you knew Drupal CI or you couldn't get help pretty much anywhere else. Now with GitLab CI, that is open source and there is plenty of documentation out there. So as I said, it would have been really easy to just say to the maintainers, you can start using Drupal, GitLab CI. But we wanted to kind of in true Drupal fashion, we wanted to provide something basic so that module maintainers could just start using it without needing a lot of knowledge about it. So that's probably the part that took a bit longer. Now the templates, which is how we are calling them, the GitLab templates, that's just a Drupal repo. So if you go to drupal.org project GitLab_templates, those are the default templates that we are giving for all the modules in Contriv. If you know GitLab CI syntax, you just need to start reading through it. And I mean, there are just a few hundred lines. It's not heavily customized, and it's just using standard GitLab syntax. It's not using any Drupalisms in the sense that, I mean, if you know CI syntax, is YAML files, you're referencing Docker images, then within those Docker images, you are creating variables, you are running commands. So if you start navigating through the code of that repo, that's where you will see all the magic happens. But as I said before, there is no, I mean, that is it. If you go through it, there is nothing hidden behind the scenes that we are doing any Drupal magic or anything like that. All the code is in there. So you see, you mentioned that there are like many jobs that we get out of the box, and they are there. I mean, if you go through the includes Drupal CI main YAML file, then you can see all those jobs. You can see the PHP coding standards, the CSPL, PHP stand, the PHP unit, the multiple variations of it. And that was code that was written from scratch with the help. I mean, we did the same process for Drupal core. At the beginning, we were thinking of using the same templates for core and Contriv, but obviously the use cases are very different. So at some point, we just fully diverged. But we've been helping one another. So things that we've been helping on core, we brought to Contriv, and the other way around. Things that we were doing in Contriv, we've taken to core.
Okay.
So I have a question for you before I get to my next question, which is the one I'm assigned to. Is you keep saying we decided this. Could you describe what we is?
Well, so that is a great question, because as I said, it was a combined effort. I'd say this module was a bit different to others in the sense that I was heavily involved in it thanks to the Drupal Association. So in a way, the Drupal Association helped a lot push forward on this. Mm-hmm. But again, it's Drupal community. There was so much done before, during, and after from the community. So it is a whole bunch of names. I don't want to even start naming some people, because I know that then I will forget some others. Sure. But the list involved in it, I mean, I did part of the keynote on DrupalCon Lille, I believe, and I put my last slide. It was just a whole bunch of names, and up until that time, there was like 30, 40 different people that were involved from the very beginning. So yeah, it is a big we in uppercase. It's been a big effort from the community. I was in a privileged position in which I kind of took some rough proof of concept, and I was able to push it to the end line, again, with the help or support of all those people that worked before me. And then ever since we push it, it has had very good, the community has received it very well, and they are very involved in the issue queue. We get a lot of help every day. The GitLab channel is very active. Yeah, that's kind of how we kept the wheels going on the code.
Oh yeah, thank you. A big community effort here. Mm-hmm. So I want to circle back a little bit to how, and you started to get into this a little bit about the YAML files, but how do developers interact with the system?
Okay, yes. So it's one of the coolest things is that you don't need to leave the browser for it. So you could go from zero to have a project fully covered by GitLab CI through the browser. So the easiest way, I mean, we created a documentation page. I mean, if you just Google literally GitLab CI Drupal, that's going to be the first result. But anyway, I'll provide the link later on. And you just need, because we're talking GitLab CI, all it needs is a GitLab CI YAML file. Now, if you were to create that file the standard way, it would be empty. You would need to write everything from scratch. But if you go through the UI, there is an option to use a template. And then if you just click on that template, it will bring you like 90 lines of code, where 85 are comments and 5 are the actual lines. Those lines are just make sure that you include the templates from that repo that I mentioned before. Make sure that you use this branch that I told you before, and then bring the variables, bring the workflows, and bring the main pipeline, pipeline code from there. So the actual code is just 5 lines. They can do it all through the UI. If you do it in a commit, then you will start having CI right after. And if you do it via an issue and a merge request, then you can start testing the GitLab CI on that merge request. So it's very easy. I mean, it's literally adding a file. Yeah.
Is that in the UI on GitLab or on Drupal.org?
On GitLab. So yeah, you just go to the repo, and then when you are viewing the files, there is an option, there is a button to add a file. And then the moment that you type the name, because it's one of the predefined names, you will get automatically the pop-up for this for the suggestion of using the template. But all that is through the GitLab UI.
Does that file become a file as part of the project?
Yes, indeed. It's located in the root folder of the project. Yeah, it's the main entry point for GitLab CI. If the file is there, pipelines will run. If the file is not there, nothing will run. And that, yeah, it's worth saying that Drupal CI had a similar approach before. It needed to have a file as well if you wanted to do some overrides, but you also needed to go through the Drupal.org UI and then set something up. In this case, it's just literally the file. That's about it. And we obviously recommend, once modules have moved to GitLab CI, if they were using Drupal CI, just to remove the file and remove any kind of schedule runs that they could have.
And one other clarification too. So I assume turning it on, like that gets you, like you said, the linting, the PHP stand, the spell checking, all that kind of stuff, but it's not going to get you tests. Like you still have to write the tests yourself. Right?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't got there yet. I mean, maybe we could do this AI sort of.
Yeah, Drupal AI. Yeah.
Write the test for my module. But yeah, we are not there yet. The module still needs to have some tests. But for example, I find it very useful. I actually have some modules where I don't have tests for it. And I still find it very useful for coding standards, spell checking, these kind of things. I mean, they are really small modules, but those things do help. And yeah, you can. One of the beauty of it, I mean, we also made it in the templates. They are highly configurable via variables. So say that you don't want to do C spell because maybe you are using British English instead of American English, and you don't want to be notified about Z versus S's or whatever. So you could just skip. So it's literally skip _ C spell. You set it to 1, and that's it. The job won't run. You can do the same for PHP stand, for any of the linting jobs, and even for PHP unit and these kind of things. So you can skip easily any of the jobs. Talking as well about the kind of customizations via variables, something very cool that we did, and that's something that we're only doing in Contriv, is that we are allowing to test the current version of Drupal, but also the next minor and the next major version of Drupal. And we can do the same with the previous minor and the previous major. And all that is just driven by variables. So you just set one variable to 1, and it will start running the test against the next, against Drupal 11. Or things like that. So that is amazing. It's worth checking out. And we are writing a lot of documentation about it as we speak. I mean, because sometimes we are just so busy in writing it, features is there, but yeah, we're trying to make it easy for people to follow.
What about, this is going off the show notes a little bit, but what about modules that require integration? So for example, Elasticsearch. Right, there's an Elasticsearch module. They have some. There's some tests that they can do that are function unit tests and that kind of thing. But if they depend on a service, is there a way to set up a full end-to-end test for a module like that, or is that
Yeah, I
outside the
mean,
scope of?
I'm smiling because last week I was helping on Elasticsearch integration.
Really? No way.
Yeah, I mean, there was already an integration with Elasticsearch version 6 and 7, and they wanted to do version 8, and then they were getting some errors. Again, we are using vanilla GitLab CI. So all we need to do in there is just reference the service, reference the Docker image, and just add the entry points. And that is it. So if, yeah, I mean, it's worth, they created an its own GitLab template, so it should be in there for the records. It's worth putting the link right after. And we had a very interesting kind of back and forth conversation on Slack and via the issue. Yeah, it's totally doable. I mean, there are services for MongoDB, for Elasticsearch. We provide by default some Docker images, which are the same that we used to use for Drupal CI, as in, if you want to use this will have the right version of PHP, the right version of MySQL that you choose. We have draws in it. And these are the images that we are giving you as default. But say that you want to use an Nginx image just because you prefer testing with it. That's not a problem. You just reference the Docker Hub Nginx image, and you just go with it. You can reference any external service. We are not having any limitations. We are not putting any walls to it. So module maintainers can use any service they desire. Yeah, I'm happy to report that the Elasticsearch 8 is integration is working now.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Nice. I actually have a follow-up on templates before we go into the next topic. But you mentioned the templates are customizable through variables, but can you also add like custom jobs as a maintainer? I know Drupal CI allowed customizations for like custom jobs, custom linting systems or tests. Is that still possible?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that it's even easier than before because you can fully customize from beginning to end anything that you want to do. Again, it's plain GitLab CI syntax. So you can define your own job, or you can even override one of the existing ones. So say, I mean, we have a job for Nightwatch, but imagine that you are using Cypress. So you could turn off Nightwatch and then create a job for Cypress and just write all the specification in there. The cool thing is that now you are not limited to a Drupal system where only Drupal people will know about it. You will literally Google GitLab Cypress IO integration, GitLab CI Cypress IO integration. And it's, we are basically using the documentation for GitLab CI. As I said, we don't have any Drupalism in it. So it's fully customizable, which is one of the things that we also like as well. We are providing some sensible standards, but we are giving kind of free will to module maintainers to do as they need in that sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, sorry, another follow-up question. What about standards, right? Because Drupal CI was kind of forcing you into certain, as you said, reasonable standards. If module maintainers have a free will to do anything, how we make sure that the standards, like high standard of code and everything else, is still met if they can remove some of the default things that are kind of not optional in the past.
Yeah, I mean, so as with everything, is kind of pros and cons, and you said it right. They could go ahead and remove something if they want. So, I mean, we are providing by default CSPL, PHP stamp, PHP coding standards, but they could just go ahead and skip it because maybe it doesn't make sense in the context of the module, or just maybe because they are not ready to maintain that at the time. So yeah, we try to give sensible standards, and the approach that we are following is a pipeline, which is how we are calling like the run of the CI system, will be successful if the tests side of things are successful. If there is any error on the linting part, so coding standards, this kind of thing. So we are showing a warning, but we are not preventing the pipeline from being successful. We can change that. For example, Drupal core is more strict about it, and Drupal core will plainly fail, because they have full control. They have their own GitLab CI file, and they can just set allow failure equals false. Whereas in our case, we have allow failure equal true for the linting. But for example, some module maintainers, they want to keep that strictness. I don't know if that's even a word. And they just override that value. So they can override any of the defaults that we provide. It's just literally 2 lines. So you just say cspell allow failure equals false, and that's it. And you are requiring that to be.
So how do you handle? How do you handle this case then? Now, because Benji Fisher helped me add some tests to a module recently, and it's a module. It's a module that sits on top of views, and it overrides some core views methods, and those methods don't follow coding standards. So the module has a lot of errors, but I haven't been able to quite figure out how core doesn't throw those same errors. Like I didn't see explicit exceptions for those. They're not using camel case or something similar to that. Like how as a module maintainer, how do you handle something like that where it's like, yeah, it's not following coding standards, but I'm literally overriding a core method in the way that you're supposed to, and it's throwing up issues. Like how do you what resources do I have to find an answer to that other than having you on the podcast and asking you?
No, I mean, that's totally fine. I mean, I think that's a great question. So that's why we are actually putting a lot of our effort now in writing additional documentation so that these kind of things become a bit easier. So we are, as I mentioned before, we are trying to give sensible defaults, but we are not trying to impose, because the moment that you get maybe too strict, it might work for modules like, say, views or web form, which are heavily used, which are heavy code. But then there are many other modules that might not have that much code, or they might not require so much kind of dedication to it. So when I say we are providing sensible defaults, is for example, when it comes to coding standards, to go into that, your particular question is like, if you include a coding standards configuration file, we will follow that. If you don't, we will use the default. With PHP stand, if you have a configuration file in your repo, we will use it. But if you don't, we will run the defaults. And the same with all the other jobs. With many of the jobs, it's like, if you have a configuration file, we will use it and respect it. But if you don't, we will try to provide a default, and we will try to give some contextual information about what's going on in that sense.
Okay.
So if you were to inspect the PHP coding standard job for Drupal core, one of the things I like, as I said at the beginning before the call, I'm super excited about this project because you can see the code. There is no secrets anymore. It's all out in the open, and it's so much easier to follow than the previous system. So you can go now and take the coding standard job in Drupal core and the coding standard job in Contrive and compare them and see really where are the differences. Like maybe core, they are using their own configuration file, and that's where some errors come from, which you may not get in Contrive just because you don't have that configuration file. But if, say, you look at the coding standards configuration files from core and then you copy paste it to your module, then you automatically have all the same coding standards.
So Nick, you kind of answered a question that was floating around in my head. As you're someone who is maintaining a few modules, have you given this a try yet? And I'm guessing the answer is no.
I only have in a roundabout way. I have in 2 ways, actually. One is, as I mentioned, Benji contributed some getting GitLab CI set up for REST views. And so that now has tests, but at the moment it's really just doing linting and coding standards and that kind of thing.
But it's using GitLab?
It's using GitLab. And then
okay.
Yeah, and then I've done a fair amount, not a ton, but I've written some tests and done some testing in Core, and so I have some experience with interacting with GitLab CI with Core, which is a little bit different than Contrib, as we've been talking about, but still pretty cool.
I like that you put him on the spot in there. Yeah, he came out nice.
Nice. Thanks so much for all the answers, Fran. So let's get back to the Drupal CI. You said it's getting deprecated, and I heard there are some changes that were happening over the past year to get us not on track for this deprecation. So what are those changes? Can you speak a bit more about them?
Yeah, so as you may or may not know, so Drupal CI, I mentioned it before, is fully like custom code, and it's actually running on a Jenkins server. So it required over the past years, because it's such an old system, again, as the versions of Drupal grew as well. I mean, when we went from 6 to 7, we were in a few years just on those versions. They were very similar, but then Drupal 8 came, and then 9, 10. So we've been getting a lot of requirements to change and to especially adapt to the new features of the language. So say the new features from PHP code or from Drupal core itself. So we found that it was very time consuming to adapt the system, and that it was in such a tricky state. I mean, in the sense that it wasn't sustainable in the long run. Basically, that's what I'm trying to get at. So over the last couple of years, we've been kind of running in maintenance mode. It's like, okay, if something broken, yes, let's fix it. It's something not working quite how we would like. Do we spend the time here, or do we try to spend the time on the new system? So the answer has been the latter. Usually, every time that people have been asking for features for Drupal CI, the answer has been, we are putting all our efforts on GitLab CI. It's coming, it's new, you're going to be able to do it. So as of changes, they haven't been very significant in the sense of adding features or bugs, but they have actually been very significant in cleanup. We've been cleaning up so much code, little by little, from Drupal CI, from Drupal.org itself. So Drupal.org is a Drupal site, and all the kind of messages that we used to see, like Drupal CI is running, go check the console. So that's a lot of code that was a part of Drupal.org, and we've been cleaning up a lot of that code in preparation for the migration to Drupal 10. So the option was, do we migrate this massive project, or do we try to shrink it a bit and then migrate that smaller bit? Drupal CI is one of those bigger chunks that we are cleaning up. I mean, as we are deprecating, we are literally disabling modules on Drupal.org. And that is just amazing, because that means that we don't need to worry about the migration. The other big one was mentioned before would be GitLab issues. So right now, I think 70-80% of the nodes on Drupal.org, they are issues. The moment we migrate those to Drupal issues, that means that we don't need to worry about the migration of the issues to Drupal 10 because they're going to be managed by GitLab. So yeah, kind of coming back to your question, what changes have Drupal CI gone through in the last year? It's been mostly cleanup. Like it's been kind of, if something is super broken, we fix it. But if it's not, we're just going to try to clean up and try to move people more and more towards GitLab CI. I don't know if you all saw the announcement, but yeah, they kind of gave some dates about when it's going to be fully turned off. I think we're going to be running things for a few more months, then no more runs will be able, projects won't be able to run tests anymore after a certain date. And then we will retain the logs for a certain amount of months. And then at some point, it's just going to be Jenkins, power off, and do not start again.
Looking
I think that's gonna make happy a few people.
Yeah, that's gonna be amazing. So recently, over the last year and a half or so, I've been doing a little bit more Drupal core development. And I've noticed some performance improvements on testing. It's my recollection that if I was testing a single version of Drupal against an issue with Drupal CI, it would take 45 to 50 minutes, sometimes more, if the queue was backed up and it took a really long time to start. Can you talk a little bit about the performance improvements moving to GitLab CI, and how long does a core test normally take
Yeah,
now
yeah.
versus back then?
That's good. I mean, to me, that was one of the most satisfying tasks that I've been involved in. Because, yeah, as you say, the old system, any Drupal test could take 45 to 50 minutes for one particular version of PHP and for one particular version of the database. When we started with GitLab CI, funnily enough, doing a full run of GitLab, we just time out after 2 hours, literally. So it's like, what are we migrating to this? But yeah, then again, it's open source. There's plenty of documentation. We saw a lot of optimizations that we could do. And one of the biggest changes was that we could run things on RAM disk instead of a physical disk. We could just say,
Oh, really?
Run all the tests, load all the tests on RAM memory, run them there. So that brought the 2 hours plus runs to around 30 minutes. And we were all like literally jumping. I mean, that is twice as fast as they were before. So we could recover half of our life or just use it for something else. And that made a lot of people happy, just breaking those 30 minutes break mark. But then again, we kept reading on GitLab features, and GitLab allows for concurrency. So you can run certain jobs in parallel. So say the PHP unit, we have 1,000 tests. We could run one job with those 1,000 tests, or we could run 10 jobs with 100 tests each. And they would run in parallel. So the compute power used in the end is the same. So we are kind of paying the same money as if it would run for 100 minutes. But now we are reducing that to 10 minutes. So we started to use first that feature. I must say that every time that we wanted to use a new feature from GitLab, we kind of needed to translate it into core. For example, for running tests on core, we are using the runtest.sh script. That script would only just run tests sequentially, but we added the possibility of kind of split it into chunks and say, I've got 10 chunks, run tests from 1 to 100, from 100 to 200, 200 to 300. So that way we could allow. So if you've worked in any issues for Drupal core, you will see that some of the jobs, they have a parallel option. Some of them have 7, some of them have 3. That was some amazing job by like Lon Dave, Kat, Bjorn. They were like literally working on weekends. I needed to turn off my notifications of emails because it was like 24/7 for 2-3 weeks, non-stop. It didn't matter that it was Saturday, Sunday. They were really testing all the possibilities. So they used concurrency in that level. We are also using concurrency from Apache built in. So by using the runtest.sh, we are using the Apache server and we are running tests concurrently. We have the concurrency of GitLab. Then we can run multiple jobs at the same time. So we don't need to, if we are running PHP unit kernel, we can also start the PHP functional. We can also start the Nightwatch test. Or for example, the linting, we can run them in parallel. Drupal CI used to do that all sequentially, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Now we're running all of those in parallel. And this is a very, very, very long reply to tell you that Drupal core tests run now in less than 10 minutes. Like literally.
They take like
just
5
ridiculous.
minutes.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, you used to. I mean, I think that's one of the, for people that are doing core development, I think that's one of the biggest improvements to velocity that the community's seen in a long time, because it used to be like if you were going to work on a core issue, you would push something up and then you'd have to wait an hour. You'd have to go do something else. Now you can push something up and, wait 5 minutes, maybe update the issue with some additional notes or something, and then it's done. You can see what's happening and move on. So you can stick with, if you're working on a couple of issues, you can stick with a couple of issues. And the amount of time this must save the core maintainers, because when they're merging something in, they have to run more tests than just the most recent one. They have to run the full test. Like, how long did when a core maintainer was merging something in, how long did it take to run the full suite on every version that was supported? Like, that must have been like the whole day.
Yeah. I mean, that would take
an hour.
literally that was literally hours. And yeah, now we can run multiple PHP versions, multiple database versions, and all of them. I mean, they run differently if they are a merge request or a scheduled commit or a plain commit. They have multiple pipelines, but yeah, on average, we are running like 10 different variants in less than 1 hour. And that's just, mind-blowing.
The other thing that is helpful with that too is, like, if something goes wrong, which occasionally happens in both cases, if something went wrong with Drupal CI and jobs backed up, I mean, I remember there were times where they backed up so far, if I recall correctly, that they basically said, hey, we're just canceling every job. You need to rerun it manually because it'll take us 6 months of runtime to catch up. GitLab can catch up. Like, it's so rare now. It used to be fairly often. You commit something, you'd have to wait for it to even start. Never mind finish. And now, like, you push something and almost immediately it's running. It's great. It's one of my favorite improvements.
Definitely, totally agree on that.
All right, we're gonna take a little bit of a timeout here. So the title of this show is what do we end up calling this show? We called it CI for Drupal modules, right? We've used a couple of terms today and talked about a few different products. We've talked about Drupal CI and we've talked about GitLab CI. And anyone who's like not in the know or using these tools, we've kind of been jumping back and forth in this conversation between these two products. Yeah. So could we just take 1 second, and what is the difference between what we call Drupal CI that you'll see in the documentation and GitLab CI? What are those things and how are they different?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because ultimately they try to solve the same problem. There are a CI system that is running all the tests or core or module, and it will give you a green light or a red light at the end. How long it takes, we've been talking about it, but yet they do try to solve the same problem. So the tools are very similar, but the main difference is that Drupal CI was a tool built by the community, maintained by the community, that it was fully custom to run only Drupal core and Drupal modules. Whereas GitLab CI, it's an open source tool whose goal is the same, is running tests against a project, but it's fully open. That's not tied up to Drupal. So you can run Drupal, you can run Laravel, you can run any sort of project, you can run JavaScript projects, you can run whatever you want. It's open source, it's fully open. The syntax is way more flexible. We've been talking about how we can create our own jobs. So for example, on Drupal CI, it would only offer you things that would make sense to most of the Drupal contrib modules or core. But say that you have an Elasticsearch module, it wouldn't offer that because it's just one module among 10,000. And then you needed to figure out a way to test those things, whether it's mocking or whatever. Whereas now with GitLab CI, it allows you to create the full service, to test the actual service and this kind of thing. So are they the same thing? Yes, they are a continuous integration system, but they are very different in which Drupal CI is highly specific to Drupal, and it was becoming very difficult to maintain and extend. And GitLab CI is not specific to Drupal, and it's very easy to extend and maintain. As I said, if you see core pipelines, it's a few hundred lines of code. Contriv code base is a few hundred lines of code, and that is running all Contriv. Like literally all Contriv modules, thousands of modules are using it, and it's just a few hundred lines of YAML code.
So today, does a module maintainer have a choice of choosing Drupal CI or GitLab CI?
If you could have asked me that question a month ago, I would have said yes.
Yep.
As you're asking me today, you can no longer opt in to use Drupal CI. If you had a pipeline, if you had it already set up before, we're keeping it for now. We're giving you all sorts of warnings. We're going to deprecate. We're going to turn this off. But as of now, you have a new module. You want to add CI. You can no longer use Drupal CI. It's part of that kind of deprecation process that we are following. But you can do with draft CI, obviously.
Yeah, the way that I think about it is, the Drupal community is huge. It's open source and it solves a lot of problems. It's early adopters for a lot of things. Drupal CI was the Drupal community's solution to, how to ensure a solid product for people using Drupal to make sure that you're not breaking. Now, occasionally there's regressions and things, but the testing policy for core has been a huge success. I mean, it's very rare that regressions happen. And it's and once a new bug is found and fixed, part of the policy is you have to have tests for it. And the team that puts that merges is very good at finding those edge cases of tests and making sure that there's full coverage. But there's a cost to being an innovator, and that cost for Drupal CI was like it's expanded over time. And as big as the Drupal community is dwarfed in comparison to the wider developer community. Which when you look at something like GitLab CI, because so many different communities and so many different people are using it, it just has a lot better support. And so, and I think that's one of the best things that Drupal over the last, decade has been doing is moving more towards, Symfony. It's been moving more towards these types of systems where it's like, hey, this is a problem that more than just Drupal has. It's been solved with this technology. Let's see how to utilize that technology. So I'm sure we've provided fixes back to GitLab CI as well. We found things that are like, hey, this would be a huge improvement for everybody else, and contributed that back. But rather than maintaining our own system, when was Drupal CI released? It's going to be more than 10 years old at this point.
I don't even know. I mean, I dare say that it's longer that I've been doing Drupal. So
yeah, it's been around for a very long time. So now the community can instead focus. It was a huge effort to move, and it's still ongoing, but the community can focus more on internal Drupal things or improving that process. I mean, I'm just thinking about the amount of time saved in shaving off 45 minutes per run. I mean, that's you can already see, like, if you look at the velocity of like Drupal core issue commits, like that's significantly higher over the past, since GitLab CI has been introduced than previously, because they can test things faster, so they can be more confident about merging something in faster.
Great. So I understand that majority of people now starting with GitLab CI, but there are a lot of modules with established test and kind of robust coverage and scripts in Drupal CI. What is the process for them to convert to GitLab CI? Is there any tool? I know community sometimes come up with a tool. Can they reuse part of the templates or some of the templates they wrote so that the migration is easier for them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's no tool for it. There is not a one-to-one conversion for it. But as with Drupal, there is a great community behind it. We've been helping in the past few months module maintainers. So the process is very easy. I mean, the process is before you were using a Drupal CI.yaml file, you can drop that and you can create a GitLab YAML file, as we were talking before. And then if you had some specific customizations on that Drupal CI YAML syntax, they do have a translation in the sense that when we were tasked with this, with the GitLab templates for Contriv, the goal was do the same that Drupal CI does, with GitLab. So I'd venture saying that everything that was possible before is possible now. Even more, I mean, we can even do more things now, but at least the subset of all the things that we could do before, they are completely possible now. And there is a translation for it. Now, what's the translation? When we're talking contrib, we're talking about thousands of modules. So it's really hard to provide a tool generic enough that helps all module maintainers as kind of rustic as it sounds. Ping on Slack, open an issue in the issue queue, and you are going to get a reply in less than an hour, for sure. Somebody will help you there. We've been helping a lot of module maintainers. I think last time we checked, and that was at least a month ago, more than 2,000 modules are using GitLab CI now, and that number is a really good number for, it hasn't been available for so long. So that means that one way or another, 2,000 modules have been able to integrate GitLab CI into their workflow with all their different nuances. So it might be, for example, the Elasticsearch, that was a very good example from last week. It was a quite challenging integration. It just wasn't working. We weren't getting any logs. We were turning all debugging options from GitLab on, and we wouldn't get it. We ended up getting the reply on Stack Overflow. And that is one of the greatest things. I mean, because we started typing GitLab integration with Elasticsearch. There was no Drupal in that question. Yeah. So we found a possible solution in Stack Overflow, and it's like, let's try this. And it worked. So yeah, there is not a one-to-one translation. I mean, it's kind of easy because you couldn't do that many things on Drupal CI. You could tweak a little bit some of the jobs, which you can still do in the new system. Even sometimes you were able to run a few scripts that you can run in the new system. But I'd say that probably the best thing, so there is a meta issue that was open a few days ago, actually, on the GitLab templates queue, where you can put your module integration, like adopting GitLab CI for your module, and then we try to help you there. But again, if you go to Slack and you just think, I don't know how to do this. I mean, if I'm around, you will get a reply from me within seconds, maybe. But yeah, if I'm not, just because I'm with the kids or sleeping or whatever, there is a lot of people as well behind it.
So you mentioned that there's over 2,000 modules already using GitLab CI. Do you have any idea how many modules are using Drupal CI still?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I didn't ask the question. Okay. I don't know.
No problem. You've mentioned a few times that Drupal CI, the project Jenkins, all that is going to be deprecated soon and going to be shut down eventually. Then the logs will be removed. What's the current timeline for that? When can we expect the deprecation, and when can we expect it to be shut off?
I don't have the dates handy. I mean, the article was just written a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say a couple of dates, but take them with a grain of salt. Put a +2, -2 months on that. I'm going to say June is the moment where we will stop running anything, but keep the results. Okay. So if you go to an issue, you will still see the results. And I'd say that January 1st, 2025 is the day that we are shutting down everything. Those are the two key dates. So as of now, you cannot add new things, but they are still running. And I think they will be running until that, I don't know if it's June 1st, because I want to think that it was right after DrupalCon, but I don't know if it was before or after.
I feel like I read it was July 1st, but I could be wrong.
Or July, yeah, it might be July. So that goes within that kind of 2-month range, plus minus.
Yeah, okay. And I'm trying to find the article right now. I can't, so yeah, we'll dig that up and put it in the show notes.
Yep. Yeah, I was just curious how long people could, because like, for example, I'm wondering when it's time to start helping other modules, like kind of like when a new version of Drupal comes out, people come out of the woodwork and help modules update to the next version. I feel like that's going to start happening pretty soon with GitLab CI for for some of the bigger modules that haven't moved yet, there's going to be a lot of issues open to help with that. So just curious when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm curious on what kind of improvements do you have planned? Any big improvements for GitLab CI coming in the near months?
Yes, so we have had a lot of things that we didn't even think of. So at first, one of our goals was try to mirror core. So we kind of started with Contriv, then we focused a lot of energy on core, and then core got to that amazing state. And then when we went back to working on Contriv, is let's try to mirror. So the starting point for Contriv was much simpler. I mean, if you see a pipeline in Contriv, it's just a composer, linting jobs, one job for testing. Whereas in core, you get all these child pipelines and all these kind of things. So we actually took kind of that goal at first. But I'd say that the community kind of changed the direction. Like really, the community, they were things that they were not in core, like running the next minor or the next major version. So we are running the test against the current version, but we want to run them against, I mean, we're on 10.2 at the moment, so we want to run tests against 10.3, and we want to run tests against 11. There's nothing like that in core at the moment. Or the same with minors, or we want to start skipping things just because it wouldn't make sense in Contriv. So we have actually, I wouldn't say abandoned that issue, but we have rephrased it. So now it's like, okay, is there anything from core that we could bring to Contriv? We are not trying to mirror them anymore. We are not trying to copy them. Now we are following separate roads, because what we have now in Contriv is helping so much better to the community than what we had in mind. So it has evolved differently. One of the things, I mean, you were talking features. So one of the features we are working on this week is actually the test-only job. That's something that has been available. That's being available. I mean, the test-only kind of contraption that's been like tied to core development for years. But I wouldn't say that it was like that to Contriv. Like in Contriv modules, maybe the module was big enough, like views or web form, maybe they could say, can you do a test only? But yeah, it wasn't really required.
Can you explain what test only jobs are for our listeners?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so I was introduced to test only concept in my very first Drupal core contribution. So I found a very silly bug in Drupal core that it was a one-liner. So I was super excited, super happy. I wrote the patch at the time. I waited my full 50 minutes and I got it all green. And then somebody just came back straight away, like after a few minutes, and it put it needs work, need a test-only job. What's a test-only job? So the way that core development works is like, okay, you're reporting a bug. I need you to prove it. What we've been doing for years is in core, they require 2 patches. One with a new test. So this is a new bug. So you will need to write a test for it that proves that there is a bug. So if this is expected and this is not going and this is not happening, write a test that says that. And then you would make a patch file out of that, just purely the test. So if you do that, then you know for a fact that it's going to fail. It needs to fail. And if it doesn't fail, then you cannot prove the bug.
So to restate, because it took me a little while to wrap my mind around this, to restate that, it's you create the patch. The way that it works right now is you create the fix and you create the tests, right? Test only kind of splits it out. It doesn't apply your fix. It applies the test, then runs the test. And those tests should fail because you haven't applied the fix for that test yet. So it's basically it does 2 things. One, it proves that, like you said, Fran, it proves that what you're saying is a bug, right? But it's also, on some level, it also helps prove that the test is also actually testing something, because it's sometimes possible to get false positives where the test passes, even though, if you miss some logic path. So yeah, these are used all the time. Like you write the patch, you fix it, you write the test, you fix it, and then you kind of run them separately to prove that there's actually an issue
so
there.
Exactly, like in the old days of 6 months ago, we actually needed to write 2 patches for Drupal core issues, one with the test only and one with the test and the fix. And that's what they would commit. Now, as we were moving to the merge requests, I mean, merge requests have been available for a while, but we were kind of core developers started to really require now merge requests. The conversation was, do we do 2 merge requests? What do we do 1 patch and 1 merge request? And then again, because of the flexibility of GitLab, we thought maybe there is a way. And the way was that it's like, okay, here are all the changes, the fix and the test. And what we do is we do in a separate job, we discard all the non-test changes and we only keep the test changes and then we run those. That should fail. That is exactly the pure definition of what a test-only job was before. Yep. So yeah, now you have it all within the same pipeline. You don't need to do a separate MR. You don't need to do a separate patch. It's just a job that you just run it. It will fail, and that's expected for it to fail. It will not prevent your pipeline from being successful. Yeah, it does it all for you, and it's just working off Git operations. It's just making a Git diff, then checking for a regex for test files in the test folder and all that, and it's discarding everything else and then running the test on those files.
And it's a manual job, I think, right? Like it doesn't run on every pipeline. It only runs like at specific times.
Yeah, it's only merge request and it's manual. Yeah, you can just choose when to do it. So yeah, as of what's coming to GitLab CI, so core have been doing their own thing. It's always at this stage, they are really just trying to optimize things. So they've been moving things around and things like that. And for Contriv, we are just trying to keep up. I mean, I wouldn't say we're feature complete because probably next week, 2 new issues will be open. And we might work on it because they are good ideas, like these variants for testing the future versions or the previous versions. We didn't think of them, but then somebody came up with the idea and we did it. And all these additional linting jobs as well, we started doing them. Like we haven't done CSPL for Contriv like ever, and we're doing it now. So yeah, we weren't planning for it, but then somebody thought about it, did it, worked, and we just went for it. So yeah, right now is the main focus is in the documentation. We've been adding a few jobs lately. There is a great documentation page, but it can be more detailed and technical, and we are heavily working on it. And for that, we are kind of eating our own food. So we are generating a GitLab pages site, which we generate through GitLab CI within the repo.
That's cool.
Nice. Speaking of documentation, if someone is about to start writing tests for their module, what would be a great starting point or resource for them to get involved with and get started?
Okay, so if we're talking tests, I would just go to the resources that we had before. So that part hasn't changed. The writing of the tests for Drupal modules is exactly the same. So we're talking PHP unit, browser test base, and all these kind of things. So all the resources that were available before, if you just literally search for writing tests for Drupal modules, those pages have not changed and do not need to change. If what they want is to start using GitLab CI, so there is this great page that we've put together, which we will add to the notes. And in there, that is a very comprehensive guide of how to install it, like all the things we were talking about before about creating the file. So there is a step-by-step in it. It talks about many of the variables that we've been talking about. How can I opt in to test the next major? How can I skip this other job? How can I maybe run a matrix of PHP and database versions? So we don't do that by default in Contriv because we don't want to overspend resources, but it is possible. For some modules make sense. They want to test the multiple versions of PHP or maybe MariaDB against MySQL, against SQLite. So that's all possible. And all that is in that one documentation page. That I'd say that that's the best entry point. And from there, we are adding links pretty much to anywhere else.
And if somebody has an issue with CI specifically, you've mentioned that they can help out on Slack, that they can get help on Slack. But if there's a bigger issue that requires like a Drupal.org issue to address, where do you create issues for CI things on Drupal.org?
Yeah, it would be Drupal.org project and /GitLab_templates. So that's where the main queue is. Yeah, it's just a normal issue queue. You can see everything that's going on there. So yeah, I mean, we usually use Slack for quick help. But yeah, if there is an actual issue or anything like that, everything is driven through the issue queue. So that's the place to do it.
Can somebody also request help, converting from Drupal CI to GitLab CI in that issue queue too, or?
Yeah, we do have a meta issue, which is meta switching to GitLab CI. They can just go ahead if they have a problem specific for their modules, rather than an improvement to all contrib, they can just mention it in there, reference the issue, and ask for help. That issue was created, I think last week. But yeah, that'd be the best issue to put it on.
Awesome. Well, Fran, thank you for joining us. It's been a huge pleasure chatting about GitLab CI and Drupal CI over the last about an hour. I'm really excited about what's coming in the future, even though I don't write a whole lot of tests. Testing is critical for Drupal success. So happy to know that there's been huge improvements.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you. And as I said, I'm really excited about this topic. So feel free to ping me on the Slack or anytime about it. Happy to help.
If you have any questions, feedback, show recommendations, topics for us to talk about, reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or you could email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can also connect to the hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Did you know there's a Talking Drupal newsletter? It comes out weekly. It has show notes, additional information, places that our guests and previous hosts will be appearing at, and much more information. You can sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron. All right, Fran, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so Drupal Slack, I kind of live my life in there. My handle is FJ Garlin, Garlin. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't do social networks and these kind of things, but I am available through Drupal Slack.
Awesome. And Anna, if listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I used to be very active on Twitter, but not anymore. So right now you can find me on Drupal Slack, or actually just message me through kalamuna.com website, and or through Drupal.org. My contact form is open, so you can contact me there if you'd like.
What's your username?
Mikhailova. So basically my first initial and my last name.
And Stephen, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
StephenCross.com and Stephen with a PH.
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
See you guys next week.
Bye.